to CovéaPod, Conversations Covéa Insurance. I'm your host for today's episode, Nicki Crabb, Head of SME and Schemes Trading at Covéa Insurance. I'm joined today by Tom Hepworth, our Research and Insight Manager, and I'm also delighted to be joined by Lea Cheesbrough, who is CEO of MOVO Partnerships and has had a really impressive insurance career. We've come together today to talk about some recent research we've conducted with 190 small business owners and how we can improve insurance understanding for all. As an industry, we want to get better at making sure insurance is accessible and understandable by all. It's critical that people are protected by insurance, and that comes into play when the worst happens. Tom, can you talk about the research and what you found?
Yeah, definitely. So over the back end of 2023 and the start of 2024, we spoke to a range of sole traders and small and medium business owners. And one of the key things that we found was that nearly half of all the sole traders we spoke to weren't insured. And that was primarily driven by a lack of understanding as to when cover was actually needed for them, but also a lot of cost implications too, particularly in recent years where premiums have increased. So around 1 in 3 believed they didn't need insurance until the business started making money or employing other people, and we all know that's wrong. But it's also compounded by another finding, which was that 2 in 5 SME business owners said they require additional support when it comes to business insurance. And that's double what we see for our other product lines. That's motor, home, pet and protection products.
Lee, does that surprise you, that the findings that we've come up with so far?
I think it does. I think my overriding emotion actually on hearing those stats is disappointment, because I think ultimately it shows that we are just not getting the message out there. I think it also shines a light on something that I'm constantly banging the drum on, which is the importance of a local broker. Because to have a local broker in your community means that those sole traders and those business startups have somewhere to go for support, who understands the landscape and also the industry of which they're working in. But it's clear we're not getting the message out there. So yeah, I think some surprise, but overarchingly some disappointment that we need to do it better to make sure that we're reaching people who really need our support.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And what type of risks do you think could happen without the right insurance in place?
I think, when talking about insurance broking, I always refer to insurance brokers as the critical friend, that fourth emergency service. And I think this is highlighted more by the work that you've all done. I think, you would not climb up a tall tower on the outside without knowing you're insured, even if you're doing that in a professional capacity or for fun. In our personal lives, we manage risk very, very well. And it always surprises me that as someone goes into business, that they stop feeling that they have to manage their own risk. We're used to insurance. We're used to it as a concept.
We're used to it as an industry.
I think a lot of the issues that we face around commercial insurance specifically are around the press and the media coverage that the insurance industry receives. We hear all the time of ghost broking, of claims not being paid. I think what happened during the pandemic and business interruption actually set the insurance industry back 20 years from a trust and an advice sector, and we're not recovering it. And it's paramount that we do recover it.
Some really, really insightful thoughts there. And what other type of additional support should there be in place for small business owners?
I think, there is support there. I think what we're not doing is signposting a way to find it. If you look at the work that Bieber have done on Find a Broker, if you look at some of the areas that you can find online, again, on Bieber and other websites around, business calculators, business insurance calculators, property owner, how to, make sure that the rebuild is different to what the value of the property is. The help is there, but I think it's hidden really well. I think the message that we need to be really clear about, and it's got muddied over the years, is that insurance is complex. We cannot make it commoditized in the same way that we have done in buying travel insurance, pet insurance and motor insurance. It doesn't work like that. The insurance sector is hit monthly by new legislation, by new laws. And unless you've got the right advice, you can't begin to navigate your way through that. The complexity of insurance is no different to when you're trying to take a medical diagnosis from an expert or when you're looking for legal guidance from a solicitor. Most people wouldn't dream of doing that themselves. They would go to an expert in the field. And the insurance sector is no different, especially in the business and commercial sectors. Every different trade will have its own requirements, its own endorsements, its own rules, its own regulation. And to try and navigate that on your own is nearly impossible. And why should you? Because actually there are 2,700 independent insurance brokers in the UK. So why should people try and navigate this on their own? We've got to kind of break through some of these barriers and challenges and make us as an industry more accessible to Joe Public.
I think that's some great insight there, Lynn. I think it's this whole piece around how we are seen as an industry. And I think sometimes we don't promote enough the professionalism, the knowledge, the expertise that is there. The CII do a lot of stuff, but I think if you're outside of the insurance industry, you don't know what the CII is. So no, some really, really good.
I think you're right. I think the CII, BEVA, ABI, all these things that are everyday, acronyms and businesses to us actually mean nothing to the customer. And more so when you look at all the work that's happened in the last 12 months on consumer duty and fair value, how much of that is actually understood or even appreciated by the customer? It's been focused around them to make it easier for them to buy insurance, make it easier for them to claim, but actually no one's told the consumer or the business owner. So, again, there's this huge drift between what we are doing to make it easier and make ourselves more accessible, but we're still not reaching the end customer. And we've really got to look inwards at ourselves and challenge this to move it forward.
Yeah, that's really, really good points there. And that kind of leads on to something I noted as well, Tom, that you saw some other interesting findings about being able to choose the right products.
Yeah, definitely. So we know insurance in itself can be a complex product. We know that when it comes to business insurance, that's escalated a little bit, 1 in 4 say they find it difficult to understand the product, business insurance, and irrelevant of which product they choose. And that's the highest, again, across the product line. And a further 1 in 6 say they lack the confidence when it comes to choosing the right product for them. And that was higher across sole traders and small business owners. There's one thing I want to point out here when it comes to research is that some people will say they understand it, even though they don't. So those figures of 1 in 4 and 1 in 6 are probably in the lower end, and we probably are up at 1 in 3, 1 in 2 find it difficult to understand, and 1 in 5, 1 in 4 don't have the confidence. And a lot of the people say they're confident, but potentially have been doing it wrong for the past 20 years, and the only time they've ever found out they're doing it wrong is when they come around to claiming. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? Because if you keep doing things the same way, you get the same results. And actually listening to you speak then, Tom, insurance brokers in the industry are exactly the same. As insurance brokers, we still go around to colleges and to apprenticeships to talk about the importance of insurance. It's great that you've now got the skills to do the job and you've even got the tools to do the job, but have you got the insurance to do the job? So we continue to do things, but that's something that we've done for the last 20 years. And actually the world has moved on. So many of our customers now as insurance brokers, our customers, the end client, are digitally savvy, where a lot of insurance brokers aren't digitally savvy. We haven't always moved with the times as an industry, and we are trying to get ahead of that, just to try and do some advertising and some education along Twitter or X or Facebook or whatever. Those are things that we're only just starting to do now, at a time where usage in Facebook and X has dropped literally off a cliff, because that's already outdated now, but we've got to get to our customers one way or another. So it's for us to understand how we can make sure that they don't need the confidence to work out what covers they need, but they do have the confidence to speak to a broker and explain what the risks and exposures that they're going through, and allow us then to advise them accordingly. And I think that is something we've got to get closer to, be it working with some of the business organisations and some of the local community groups, training organisations. These are all things that we are trying to do. I think the reality is in the insurance industry, we're all doing it in piecemeal. There isn't one movement that's enabling us to cover the whole of the UK with the same amount of delivery as we're giving in small isolated spots. So I think we've got to take that forward as insurance brokers and as insurers anyway, just to understand how we can work together. Because, insurers like Covéa can't be successful without the broker. The brokers can't be successful without the customers. We have to join forces to make this happen and to get that confidence and the education and the opportunity out there, because we are providing a very, very important service. We are being the critical friend. We're providing protection and cover, not just for the business, but for the people in it. And that's paramount.
I love this idea of calling it out and kind of bringing it together. And I think that's something we're so proud of at Covéa, that we've actually taken part in doing this research. And it's great to hear that you're doing that already, because I think when you start reflecting on it, the general public, including small business owners, the only time we actually have that interaction with insurance is claims, isn't it? It's either claims or perhaps you get your renewal doc come through and, oh my goodness, it's gone up.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much value, Lee, that you've noticed that a broker can add and bring, which is fantastic. And I think it's just that communication piece.
It's that education piece, because actually, I mean, we've done our own research within MOVO, and we know for a fact that a lot of our customers, until they've worked with us, or until they've worked with us and maybe one previous broker before, still don't really understand what a broker should do. You know, is it, you know, and there's a real kind of misnomer in the industry that if you go to a broker, it's going to cost you more than if you go out direct. You know, we've seen all the adverts, cut out the middleman, go direct. But that isn't right for all products. But unfortunately, that's the messaging that's stuck. So we've got to try and find out how we can put the middleman or woman back in again and make it that, you know, it's seen as a comfort. You know, you wouldn't have a situation where someone takes legal action on you and you try and Google the answers directly yourself. The first thing you will do is pick up the phone to speak to a solicitor. We need to make it the same for the insurance industry. And for those that have had successful claims, you know, have been supported through by a broker, they know the value of it. And as well as I said that the industry had been really affected by the pandemic, I have to say that actually, in some ways, whilst the tragedy, the human element of the pandemic was absolutely awful, for an insurance broker, it was actually quite buoyant time for the broker, because people needed support on business interruption, on understanding their policies. Those people who were on the end of a phone who sold it them didn't know the answers to something so unprecedented. So we ended up helping a lot of customers who weren't even clients of ours, but just needed help. And that's where we stepped in as the critical friend. And that's where we then sort of supported those clients who came across to us because they chose to work with a broker. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute we want another pandemic. Of course we don't. But we do need to keep on banging the drum and educating the end customer that a broker is here to support them, not to cost them more in the chain.
And we did see that in a similar piece of research we did, which was, I suppose, saying an increasing rate of customers buying direct on the internet, and then 6 months later going to a broker that maybe they'd worked with previously or they knew of, and saying, can you help me here, because I think I've got myself in a pickle that I can't set out because they've chosen the wrong products, the wrong level of cover or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some cases it was the right cover, but they couldn't get the claim support that we needed at a time where we were in lockdown, but the broker could actually help them do that. But in most cases, we deal so much in a lot of cases where it's gone wrong online, and we show our value at that point just by helping. That's before we've even earned anything from working with a customer. We are here to help. And, you know, I know so many of the brokers in the UK, and there's not so many. It's declined from 7,000 to 2,700 in 6 years. So it's declined because we're seeing all the acquisition. And I think there's part of that in my mind that actually is impacting the end customer, because if they've no longer got a local community broker, and they did have before, they may not realise there are other options to them even locally still. They feel like they have to go online. And so it's about making sure we've got plenty of independent brokers in the communities, and we keep growing those brokers and supporting them to be professionals within their local regions.
And Lee, we touched on earlier that we don't actually think commercial insurance for small business owners is complex, but it's the communication of it and working with brokers that helps that. But when we think about complexity insurance, what are some of the areas you think that could be made easier?
I think knowing the value, the biggest area that you're going to get issues with claims is underinsurance. You know, it's something we've all been talking about for probably a decade, and we still haven't fixed it. You know, underinsurance for our customers is something that is still causing a lot of problems. I think personally that commercial insurance is complex for somebody who's a man on the street or a woman on the street. I don't think it's easy. I think, you know, people buy 5 million public liability, not because they understand they need it and that a claim can come to 5 million, but because someone they're working for has requested they have 5 million public liability limits. So that isn't understanding it. You know, public liability may seem straightforward, but it can be complex. So I think, you know, making sure that there's access for people to work out what their rebuild of their company is, or their property is, understanding what the exposure of their company is. You know, who are they working for? Are the contracts big? Are they going to height? Are they going to depth? Will they be working with heat? Are they going to be employing people? Employment legislation is an absolute minefield. And yet it's seen that, I've only got one or two staff members. It's hugely complex. There's so much statute and law goes around that, and so much exposure for an employer. Again, it's not that we want to go around scaring people half to death, but there are so many opportunities for it to go wrong. Even if you are a sole trader or someone with a small business, it's about making sure you're looked after. This is about putting that umbrella up over all of our customers and protecting them from whatever rains down. That's our job as insurance brokers. We're trained to do it. We go through years and years of training and, professional qualifications to offer the right advice. We're going through rounds and rounds and rounds of compliance and governance with the FCA, which I think for once are getting it right. I think the FCA have really started to listen to the insurance brokers and to the insurers to guide the customer in the right way. I don't think we've ever had it as good with the regulator as what we're having it right now. So we are being trained and supported to support our customers in every way. We just need to show them that we're here.
I really like that analogy, Lea, about the umbrella. It's something I always use talking about people as well and protecting people. So I think Absolutely. That's a great one. And I think as well, if we start breaking down into looking at the value and getting the values right, I know, Tom, you kind of did a bit more research into kind of what the value of the right item should be. What did you find out about that?
Yeah, so we gave the business owners a range of hypothetical situations where I suppose there was three different scenarios. So where the provided value was at policy purchase for property or stock or tools, but subsequently made a claim for greater than the given amount. So I suppose effectively claiming for more than they told us that was worth. And one real consistent across all those responses was that 1 in 3 were unaware as to the consequences of undervaluing items, and many thought that the claim would be paid in full regardless. And on top of that 1 in 3, a further 1 in 10 openly admitted that they were unsure as to what would happen with their claim. And what that says to me is that a lot of people just think I can stick whatever I want when it comes into the policy, when you take out the policy, and that will probably get paid out. It won't have any impact in terms of when I make a claim. We were also slightly startled. We mentioned that insurance in general is relatively complex, but some of the basics, or what we would perceive as basics, are also relatively misunderstood as well. So talking about excesses, for example, in total, 3 in 5 SME business owners don't understand that both compulsory and voluntary excesses can and probably will be incurred when they make a claim on the policy. So again, that's someone potentially entering higher voluntary excesses with a view to get premiums down, come to make a claim, and again, you're paying out more, or potentially, I suppose your excess is higher than your claim amount, and you don't get paid full stop. So that lack of understanding is really impacting people when it comes to make a claim. We've got the data behind it, and Lea mentioned it as well, but even though there's been work on it for the past 10 years, it's still a really high proportion that don't really know, I'm going to say almost the basics of business insurance.
And Lea, how do you think we can make excesses clearer for customers?
I think it's a good point. I mean, again, if it is that you're with a broker, that is something that is explained to you. Certainly if you're it's in two parts, the answer. If you're a consumer and you're going through a broker, part of the Consumer Act that's just come in recently looks at the Consumer Duty Plan, looks at affordability, looks at understanding to make it clear. We have got so many more tools in front of us now as insurance brokers to ensure that our customers understood what we're giving them, to make sure that we can align it to their personal circumstances and best advise them. That is what you're paying for when you go via a broker. You're getting advice. I think for those that try and do it online, unfortunately, what drives these habits is the end product. And I've been involved in these studies myself previously for other businesses. Unfortunately, as a customer who's trying to self-serve, so they're buying online themselves, they just want the figure at the end to be right. They want it to be affordable. And it's not done with malice. It's not done out of any other way other than they want it to be affordable and they want it to be quick. But without really understanding what the excesses are, they don't understand that by putting that up, they're going to reduce their premium, but they're going to have to pay more in the event of a claim. And I think generally the industry needs to be much clearer about excesses, certainly for motor. I see it a lot in motor where you do have a voluntary and then a compulsory, and it catches a lot of people out. I think within business insurance, it tends to work more that there is an excess for each element. But you can have up to 6 or 7 different excesses on one business policy. And that is very confusing. It could be you've got an excess for theft, you've got an excess for flood, you've got an excess for subsidence. So there's so many different excesses, and understanding that is quite difficult, especially when some of the covers that you are purchasing may not be included, but the excess will still pull through. It causes an issue in that individuals think that they are covered for it because an excess is noted, when that cover may not be in play at all. So we see these things a lot. And again, it's the complexities of how business insurance works. The ultimate point here is around, first of all, education for the consumers who are self-serving and the small business owners who are self-serving, but also clarity across the industry that we're making this so much clearer as well, even when dealing with a broker.
I think one of the things I'm really proud we've done at Covéa as well is we've reworded our policy wordings to try and put them into plainer English, which I think is a really good start. Because if I reflect back many years ago, when I was an underwriter and I started training, and you start looking at BI and preambles and all of this stuff, and you're kind of, what is this? What is this? And I think it doesn't do anybody any good where we've kind of got this complex stuff going on in this complex language. And I think that could perhaps even be kind of more difficult to understand if kind of you might be neurodiverse. And I know, Tom, you've been doing some research and some evidence and some findings into neurodiversity. And so do you want to share some of that with us?
Yeah, of course. So as part of the research, we put some profiling in there, and one of them was around neurodiversity. So 1 in 6 SME business owners said they were neurodivergent, and those most prominent conditions being dyslexia, ADHD and dyscalculia. So that's, I suppose, interpreting numbers. And it's worth highlighting, this is well above the UK average. So the UK average is 1 in 7, this is 1 in 6, and it's the highest across all of our product lines. And when we started thinking about it and considering the link, that there is, I suppose, a really prominent link between neurodiversity or neurodivergency and, I suppose, entrepreneurs in a way. So the resilience, the creativity, the ability to think outside the box. And it's not a surprise as we initially thought. It is worth highlighting, though, that those that are neurodivergent tend to struggle more with things such as insurance and things that are maybe not as black and white. And it can make them more challenging. I suppose, year on year, day to day.
That's really, really insightful, Tom. And Lee, did you have any thoughts on neurodiversity and within insurance?
Yeah, again, it's something that I think a lot of businesses, certainly at MOVO, we've been looking at probably for the last 2 years now. And the reason we were looking at it was because we knew the consumer duty plan was coming in, and we needed to make sure that we were supporting customers who were perceived to be have vulnerabilities or would need extra support. It's interesting because it's actually in 2002 that the requirement from the FCA came about for all policy wordings to be clear and concise. And it's something that we've all been working to now for over 2 decades. The issue you have is that, as we've already said, insurance can be complex. So how simple can we make it? And the answer is not very. It's, if you don't understand the subject matter, you're not going to understand it at all. And I think if you have got, added aspects to your personality or to your educational position, that means it's even harder to understand anyway. It's a difficult thing to do. There are no easy things to wave a magic wand on this. I think what the Consumer Duty Plan has done is enabled us to have more robust conversations as brokers with our customers. We've been caught between a rock and a hard place for years, where we have to work under GDPR, so protecting people's interests, not being able to talk about them, but at the same time trying to understand whether or not affordability, language understanding, education are allowing the customer to understand what we're doing. So it's been really difficult for insurance brokers. It's been working with your hands tied behind your back. What the Consumer Duty Plan has done is given us the support to agree who we want to work with in the first place. So who can we support and who can't we support? As insurance brokers, we're much more closer to that than we ever have been. And I think we're much more closer to understanding how we can support people who may have dyslexia or ADHD or, have even just number dyslexia. We are now in a position where this is something we talk about a lot more. And actually, so many of our brokers fall into that category. So many of our insurance brokers within MOVO especially are entrepreneurs. They're business leaders and owners themselves. Many are startups. They've walked in the same path as many of these customers that they're trying to support. And I think that helps enormously to have empathy as opposed to sympathy. And we really try and work through that. We do a lot of training in MOVO as to how best we can understand this. And we've actually built our system to support recording information without saying anything that may be seen as derogatory or as being something that's too personal or that breaches someone's confidence. So, and I believe with a passion, the whole of the insurance industry are working to do this. But we do need to be mindful that, again, business insurance needs an expert. And if it is that you struggle more than some others in other areas, then you should be talking to an insurance broker, because they're now trained and supported, not just from the people that they work with internally and regionally, but by the regulator, the FCA, and now supporting insurance brokers to support the end customer, which makes it more important that we educate customers to go and speak to an insurance broker as opposed to trying to do it themselves.
Some really great thoughts, Deli, and I really like all the stuff your business is doing already to support this, and noticing that and linking back to how it has moved on. There's still a way to go. And if we start thinking about support just in general that we should have in place for people starting out with their business and understanding, what more could we do about how we can support and when people need insurance and how that would work for them? Is there any other things we can think that would help?
I think we've got to get to it on a local level. I mean, you look at the work that the Federation of Small Businesses is doing. They've got a really interactive website. It doesn't often talk about insurance. It talks about legal requirements, about making sure your trading styles have been done properly. So again, I think there's definitely something on us as the insurance industry to go and speak to organisations such as the Federation of Small Businesses, speak to local business community groups, speak to apprenticeships who are releasing the next cohort, if you like, of customers to both us and to insurers. We've got to get to these individuals earlier and support them. Most brokers that I know of, or nearly all brokers I know, will offer a business consultancy. They understand what it is to start at the beginning, what exposures and things to look out for, what the pitfalls are as you grow, what you should be considering if you decide to do things different or diversify. Our industry has diversified so much in the last 4 years. Someone who used to have a cafe who had to close in the pandemic now sells brownies and delivers them, now does birthday cakes to order. These are all different things. That are they insuring them properly? We saw so many manufacturers moving to creating PPE and sending that out, which meant they had to pass certain safety regulations that they hadn't dealt with before. Diversification is happening. That's happened for the last 4 years. But if you're not dealing with a broker, how can you understand what the risks are? How can you manage to plan for those exposures and not get caught out? And that's what we've got to do. We've got to get closer to local business, get closer to local startups, and get closer to the apprenticeships who are training the future workers that we will be co-jointly insuring as we go forward.
That really, really all makes sense. And I love thinking about kind of the next generation and what do we do and how do we do that. Tom, have you got any closing thoughts on your research and what you found out?
I suppose we've all spoken at length in terms of the complexity of the product and kind of some of the pitfalls in misunderstanding certain terms. But one of the first stats I shared was around that nearly half of sole traders not being insured, and that's massive. And that's one of those areas that, do you know what, those people could really be liable for a mistake or just some innocent mishappening. And it's understanding, again, like Lee mentioned before, how we can get those people when they're opening the business or setting it up and making sure they are covered. Because, if you take out the wrong product, it may be that you kind of impact slightly financially or quite a lot financially. But if you haven't got insurance in the first place, it's probably a lot more severe consequences that could happen.
Absolutely. And Lee, any final thoughts from you?
No, I think it's good that I think Covéa have taken the time to do this piece of research. I think collaboratively, we've got to start all working together across the insurance industry, and hopefully more insurers are going to do this, speak to more brokers, but actually not just stop there. We need to collaborate. We need to continue to talk. We need to understand what you are doing versus us versus someone else. We talk about the insurance industry as this, it produces 2% of the GDP in the UK, which is a huge figure. But it's actually quite a small marketplace, and I don't think it's too difficult for us to all start to put some plans together to work together for the people who are trading now, and as I've already said, those in the future who will be our customers hopefully one day.
I think we've covered some really, really interesting areas, and I think what's pleasing for me is that there does seem to be this want, this desire to move this forward, to look at education, what we can do, how we can be better across the industry. And I think we're getting there. I think it's all about calling it out. And I think, Lee, you mentioned some of the good initiatives that are out there, some of the great work you've done. I know, Tom, you'll be keen to carry on this research and keep checking and seeing how it goes on. And I think there's so much more we can do and talk about. And I look forward to talking about some of these topics again in due course. But that's been great. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you so much, Lee. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for listening to CovéaPod. Please keep up to date with our podcast by subscribing to Spotify. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn, where we offer support on making insurance even easier to understand.